Manal Al Dowayan. Come in. Come in. She was born and raised in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. Over the course of her education, she partook in a range of courses in different art institutions in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Bahrain, and London. In 2009, she was a resident artist at the Delfina Foundation in London and attended the Clore Leadership program. In 2010, she was a resident artist at Cuadro Fine Art Gallery in Dubai and British Council International Cultural Leaders program. Her artworks are part of the prominent collections of the British Museum, the Jordan National Museum of Fine Art, the Abdul Latif Jamil Foundation, the Delfina Foundation in London, and the Abu Dhabi Authority for Culture and Heritage, the Nadour Foundation in Germany, and the Barjeel Foundation in Sharjah. أهلا وسهلا. منال الضويان.
شكرا. لسه صباح الخير. Good morning, everybody. I think my talk is going to be a mixture of Arabic and English. نسميها عربش. Before I start anything, I just wanted to thank Nuqat and their team and Kuwait for putting together such an amazing gathering. And this is something that we're looking for as creatives, artists, designers, even just people interested in the creative scene here in the Gulf. And for them to put us all together in one space with amazing music, great food, excellent conversations, I think this is something that really needs to continue. And that said, I will start my little talk. So, yeah, for Nuqat. So my talk is titled A Journey of Belonging. And the reason I chose this title was to go along with the theme of this gathering, which is culture shock. Now, to live where I live, you're constantly in a state of culture shock. You could be born into a culture shock, actually. And your reactions to it are usually either expressed through conversations with your friends, through writing, through sending mass emails, tweeting nowadays, and I chose art. So, I'm not sure how, all right, so some things are not going to work on this presentation. I'll start, no, it's okay. I think I'll go ahead. Yeah. So, this is the beginnings of my art, and I had started as a photographer purely. I'll give you the real basic story of my journey because I think there's a lot of people that I met during this conference that are working and are also creative. I met a dentist that wants to be a filmmaker. I met an investment banker that wants to open up a gallery. And this combination and thinking that you can only do one thing at a time is very wrong. When I finished my bachelor's degree, my father attended my graduation with employment papers. Mafi vacation, Mafi have fun for the summer. He wanted me to work immediately. So I joined the oil industry, which is the biggest company where I live, which is in the Eastern Province, and I worked for 10 years. Within those 10 years, I was practicing my art on the side. I was printing in a darkroom that early Americans, geologists that used to explore our landscape in Saudi Arabia would take pictures and use the darkroom to print for scientific reasons. They left, this was in the 60s, so I was working with equipment from the 1960s. But as you know, darkroom equipment has not changed since the 60s. So I was very blessed to have that space, humongous darkroom with amazing equipment, all mine to play with. I produced a lot of work in that darkroom while I was an employee. And there was no art scene within the region. We had 0 galleries in Saudi Arabia. There were galleries that sold furniture and a couple of decorative art, but no proper galleries. There were no art fairs, there were no biennales, there was nothing. People were not buying art. Actually, they would come to my exhibitions and say, Allah halu, and that's it. I would say, and I was selling it at such low prices, and still people are like, really, Yani, it's so expensive. I think I was selling my artworks for $300, which is, and people really استغلوها. They're like, oh my God, Yani, are you crazy? This is just a photograph. But this, of course, has changed now. And the first collection I produced was because of a result. I had gone off to do my master's degree in London, and it was a scholarship. Both my company and my parents wanted me to study something that can give me financial independence. And I understand when a father says, I will not allow you to be an artist because it is not secure for me in the future. How will I make money? And he did not see an art scene. So I went to study systems analysis and design. Nothing to do with the art scene. But at the evenings, I used to take the money that my father would send on the side so I can, buy food. And I went to art school in the evenings. And I studied darkroom printing. And I had my first exhibition at the end of that year. And these artworks were a result. It started with this. This continued for about 2 years. The I Am collection. I Am is a statement about a social situation that we have in Saudi Arabia. Women make up 50% of the population, but only 3% work in jobs. And we already know the importance of having, as a woman, financial independence. You have more choices. You can contribute to the decision-making in your family. Now, making 50% of our population completely dependent on somebody else to give them money, and if there is nobody else, that means they live in poverty. Thankfully, in 2005, when King Abdullah took over the throne, his speech that day when he became king of Saudi Arabia was that women will be included in building this country. There were statements specifically put within that speech. He mentioned Salama, which is one of the biggest advocates in Islamic tradition of women's rights. He had specifically made that speech to show that women's empowerment is coming with my rule. There was extreme excitement within the community of women's rights activists. We're like, khalas, we're going to be putting in our resumes, we're going to be working everywhere. Next day, the newspapers came out and critics were saying, hold on, you are not going to be ala kayfkum. There's going to be jobs for women, but these jobs have to suit her nature as a woman. Which led me, thank you, Rose, which led me to think about what suits my nature, who decides what suits my nature. So I looked around me, and I saw very inspiring women. And let's say the reality is women were working, women were doing amazing things. This is in real. Where the philosophical discussion was happening was it was disconnected from reality. Women will work. Women have to bring income to a two-income family situation. So I invited many women, and it became a participatory project. I sent out a little text message to everybody I knew and told them, come in, we work on project about women's employment. It started off with, I'm an educator, I'm a petroleum engineer, I'm a doctor, and this is a large collection of photographs you can see on my website, but it concluded with, I am a Saudi citizen, which is a big statement of, I belong to this landscape. And here you see the beginning of the journey of belonging that I started with. I later, of course, I was quite young producing these, so my statements were very clear. Yani there's no abstractness. What is this about? Driving directly. This was shown in Saudi, so many times, and it did not get censored, and there were very important dialogues. The reason I'd say I did not get censored, there are a lot of things that are happening in Saudi that are quite negative, but there is something that nobody realizes, that there is a dialogue. And when there is a dialogue, that means there is hope for something to change. So if you can talk about things in art, in media, this is positive. When you can't talk, that's when you give up, I guess. So this is a collection called The Choice. It addresses everything from women driving, participating politically, and even sports. Women cannot play sports in schools. Then I went off to do a residency in 2009 at the Delfina Foundation. I was very much influenced by the pop art movement. There was a lot of exhibitions happening when I was there in London. And I was intrigued by the idea of capturing an image from a newspaper, which is something that is temporary. You read it and you throw it away. And you remove it from that context and you put it onto an artwork, and it has a different kind of life. And you explore it in a very different realm. Me and my mother became obsessed with collecting newspapers, and I still do this. And you'll see even my latest work is about collecting things from newspapers. I had a little obsession with how women are represented in our media, the ghosts that float around when they write articles about women. And different imagery that I use. Something I'd like to point out, these are called landscapes of the mind. It was a project about belonging to the landscape, or do I belong to it, or does it belong to me? And there was also a little bit of a questioning of what is a Saudi landscape. So you would always think a Saudi landscape is a sand dune, a Bedouin, with a oud music in the background. But in reality, this was sort of the post-9/11 look of Saudi Arabia, which is barbed wire and all these barriers, security, fear, and the first appearance of the doves, which you see sitting up there on the wire. I'll come back to the doves later. Then in 2010, I moved to a different residency in Dubai, which was another city, very exciting city, but then there was a lot of isolation. People live in very high-rise buildings. They have their satellite TV, do not mix with their neighbors, do not talk to the person next door. You don't know. There are partitions. Even going back to Saudi, because I was between Dubai and Saudi, partitions and restaurants, tinted cars. It was very hard to create sort of a relationship with other humans. And I started imagining that the city was a man, and the inhabitants were the women, was a woman, and there was a relationship between them, but they were breaking up. They're on their way. It was over. And the title of the show was, "And We Had No Shared Dreams." And it started with this set of diptychs and triptychs and neon light, and you'll see city influences in this collection. I also, at the same time, when I arrived at the Cuadro residency, the people that had done the residency before me were graffiti artists from New York, which is Futura 2000, Stash, and a few others. They had left all their spray cans for me, so I started to play. I've never touched spray cans before, but they're very intriguing because they have this anarchic feeling. They are sort of the voice of demonstration. Yeah, and it has. They're very political, I feel, graffiti, especially in the Arab world with revolutions. Graffiti artists are completely not felons. They are actually heroes within. So I started playing with it. I also neon got introduced into my work at that stage. And this is a technique that I picked up from Futura, who used to, when he sprays paint, the nozzle of the paint can would get stuck, so he would flip the paint can, hit it on the floor to empty the nozzle and continue spray painting. And he started experimenting with this spray effect, the feathering. And his artworks have a lot of this feathering, and I decided to include it within my artwork. Also, you see the dove coming up here again, and this time on the body of this dove, it's a collage, is the permission slip for women to travel. So in Saudi Arabia, for me to travel, I need to have a appointed male guardian. So I don't choose who becomes my guardian. And because my father had passed away by then, my youngest brother, who I changed his diapers, became my appointed male guardian. Thankfully, my brothers are very, very scared of me. So I don't have any problems with traveling, and actually have a very good relationship. And it's only very, very lucky women who are surrounded by men that are also supportive and understanding of and they have this compassion for their life and what's happening in them. So it got included in this artwork. The dove with the body has the permission slip, ورقة الإذن حق السفر. Then I decided to move this dove to a larger project. And this is when I started thinking about how do I belong to a community? Do they want me to be a citizen? Does this landscape want me, or does it reject me? So I personally started looking at, let's get more people coming along with me and saying, when I say a statement, I want them all to nod with me, yes. And there's that something very basic and human about having everybody else agreeing with you and saying, yeah, I agree with you. And you feel better and you feel like, you know what, I am right, I'm not crazy. But I sent out a simple email. Those days, social media was not so big in Saudi Arabia, so I just sent a mass email to a bunch of friends and said, please forward to your other friends. Donate your permission to travel slip. And hundreds of women responded to me. And remember, this permission slip is issued by the male guardian. So that means they're sort of saying, I don't care how you feel, my guardian. I'm going to contribute to this artwork. There are personal IDs, names, and they just gave it to me. I was shocked. So I placed these permission slips on the bodies of doves that were sculpted out of fiberglass and then hung them together. And this artwork was called Suspended Together because there are permission slips for children, 6 months old girls, to older women as old as my mother who participated also. There are award-winning scientists, there are artists, engineers, incredible women. But when you look at them here in this artwork, they look like they're in flight, but in reality, they're frozen. They're suspended. They look very beautiful, but their situation is not so beautiful. Then I turned back to my nostalgia of black and white prints in 2012 and decided I want to go back to the dark room. I cannot deal with the big installations anymore. And this is a project that was sort of sitting in the back of my mind for many, many years, but I couldn't produce it. It was a project dedicated to my father who had passed away 3 years prior to this. My father had suffered from Alzheimer's for 7 years before he passed away, and I never had the opportunity to ask him questions, simple ones, of where did you live? What did you eat? Was your mother, did your mother hug you? Or how rough life was? How did you move from one area in Saudi Arabia and wind up in Sharjah? My father was in Al Qasim, which is the central area of Saudi. How did you move from there to oil industry? And how was it to travel? The culture shock of going to America in the 60s, racist America, where he was in Texas for a while. And he did actually suffer from, drinking from the different fountain. And this racism had come to Saudi Arabia with the Texan engineers and oilmen. So I titled this work, If I Forget You, Don't Forget Me. And in reality, this is something, the title of the work is a little prayer. It's if you put, Ya Rab, إذا نسيتك فلا تنساني. But I removed Ya Rab to give it more of a, so God, if I forget you, don't forget me. I decided to go and collect my father's story through the collective memory of his friends, his peers, oil men and women, even people who did not know him very well, but they lived the same. There was a generation, I think, in all of the Gulf, even in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Qatar, there were men and women that saw the extreme poverty and then saw the extreme wealth. And this movement from this to that gave them a complete different outlook to life. I will never see it. I don't think most of this audience will ever understand what was in the past and what we are living right now. I asked them to tell me their stories, and through their collective memory, I collected my father's story. So let's look at, I'll give you it's a large collection of 20 pieces, but for example, this is called Badr's camera. Badr is a Palestinian who had come as an immigrant to Saudi Arabia. He was recruited in the early 50s, late 50s. And I did portraits of these people, but how did these portraits were formulated is not their face. I asked them to give me their objects that traveled with them throughout their lives. Because when my father passed away, his pen and his mug and his ridiculous price doesn't have value, money value, but these things became so valuable to us because we felt his life story are in objects. I decided to do these portraits of their objects. These people are still alive, of course. So Badr because he's a Palestinian, his favorite object was a box filled with pictures and a camera of his home in Palestine. His children have never seen this home. This home doesn't exist anymore. Even if he were to show them the pictures, they wouldn't be able to imagine beyond that black and white print. Only he can carry that memory with him. That's Badr's camera. That's called Najd. This is by a geologist, Dr. Sadad Al-Husseini. He explored all of Saudi Arabia, one of the very few graduates at that time of geology. He graduated from Brown with a doctorate. But he was still pushed into living a tent, and the Americans were living in portable, air-conditioned portables. He traveled the whole of Saudi Arabia and photographed a Bedouin life that disappeared. And these people did not see anybody come to them. He was one of the first people to come as a traveler. His house is full of amazing maps. And what is adorable is this geologist has this obsession of love for Saudi Arabia that when he married his wife, who is Saudi but was raised in Beirut, he took her on a honeymoon following the pipeline in Saudi Arabia. How romantic. And you can imagine that there were no bathrooms, nothing. This is their introduction to each other, and this is how they fell in love. This is called Oil Family. The gentleman on the left had left his young wife in Saudi Arabia and moved to America to study. He later on became working in New York. He brought her from Breda, Qasim, which is a very conservative village in Saudi Arabia, brought her to New York, and she had braids up to here. And the third day she was in New York, he took her down to the salon and told them, make her look American. Chop off the braids. And she cried for days and days over the braids. She was actually lived in extreme isolation because of the language barrier. There was extreme difficulty, which we don't realize today with having the language, and you can speak and you can communicate and everybody's well-traveled. Imagine being a woman from Breda with your braids cut off and you're sitting in a New York apartment watching. In the interviews that I did, she would tell me the stories of, she would see people kissing in the street and she would have a heart attack. And now of course, all of these people had become the leaders of an oil industry in Saudi Arabia. Their beginnings were very basic, but they wound up doing amazing things. Saud al-Ashkar, these are just the snapshots of the videos, because this collection comes with a video element. Saud al-Ashkar, as a child, was a sheep herder. And at a time, there was a huge drought in Saudi Arabia. And his father, at the age of 8, gave him the herd of sheep and told him, take it to the closest village, sell it, and get us any kind of money, because if the sheep stay here, they will die and we will starve. He crossed Sahra al-Dahna. Al-Dahna is one of the larger deserts in Saudi Arabia, on foot with dates and water. That's it. And half the sheep died. He survived this trek. And now, he retired as the second man in command of the largest oil company in the world. Down here, Muna Atiyah is a young woman from Medina. Her father had an obsession, a vision of how women should be when nobody had it, and he sent her to be educated in Egypt. She later had to come back because Jamal Abdel Nasser and King Faisal had a little rift. All the Saudis had to come back. All the Egyptians had to go back to Egypt. She was brought back and continued to study. When she finished her high school, she was the first, الأولى, on high school of boys and girls. At that point, King Faisal had given a statement saying the top 10 will be sent on a scholarship to America. So she went and applied for the scholarship. They said, لا, we didn't mean girls. We meant boys. So she got so upset because she's like, but أنا الأولى. So she asked, where is King Faisal? And King Faisal used to rule Saudi Arabia in Riyadh during winter and during summer in Taif. He was in Taif. She went to Taif and she sat with King Faisal. She walked into, this is how she described it. She's like, the room was humongous. King Faisal was at one end and she walked in and sat at the door. King Faisal told her, I'm an old man. If you're going to sit there, I'll not hear you. You have to come closer. And she did. She told him, Ana al-Ula. He said, I know. And she said, I want to go al-Bu'tha. And he gave her the Bu'tha. So she went off and studied her degree. So because of time, I'm going to sort of, yeah, good for Muna. Her daughters now are, one teaches in MIT as a professor, and her other daughter is the head of the engineering society in Saudi Arabia, the only female in the, so she created also very important women. Then I moved on from that very intimate project into something, again, I needed more women. I needed to have the whole society come in and talk to me. We have this little thing happening in Saudi Arabia where, and I think a lot of, even in the Gulf, where men do not say the name of women. So men will say, instead of زوجتي Lulu, they would say الأهل, الحلال. Sisters, mothers, daughters, nobody mentions the names of women. And it became ridiculous. I even asked my brothers, I'm like, do you say my name in front of your friends? They said, depends what friends we're sitting with. If they are Arab, we're not saying anything. If they are modern, we would. So I decided to do something about it. I first started to design the project. I worked with local craftswomen, Al-Badu, who work in Sedu, which is my obsession, weaving, and these are the original money earners. Women were earning money for the Bedouin tribes. Men were herding the goats. They were the ones that supported the family. But of course, now they've disappeared. They've gone into extreme poverty because everybody wants French-style furniture, the Baroque gold, and Sedu has disappeared. But there are still some societies in Saudi Arabia that support them, and these are the craftswomen I worked with. So I did simply, on my website, I put هل تريدين مشاركتي في عملي الفني, Twitter, Facebook, and then women started registering. These are the Twitter announcements. Then women's organizations started donating their spaces to me. I had hundreds of women emailing me. I had to hire 2 assistants to help me organize this campaign. I was going to travel from the east of Saudi to the west of Saudi to do this artwork. So I would give a lecture. I start off by talking about who decided that women's names were aib. Why do we have to cover the name? Is covering the name part of covering the self, the face, the voice? كله صار عيب. Why are you, who can change this? And obviously it's you, it's the women that can change it, nobody else. So I spoke to them about this and I told them, this is what you're gonna do, you're gonna write your name. It was very exciting. I started in Sharjah, my hometown, where women came in, started writing their names. There's Tala Saleh, our little technician up there. And putting their full names, and knowing that their names are going to, I told them that these artworks are going to travel the world, they're going to be photographed, they're going to be part of collections. Your names will be announced all over the world. And there was a buzz in the room. There was so much excitement. I had sisters come to this, mothers and daughters. Even fathers wanted to participate. I also had my role models, Dr. Hattoun Al-Fasi and Dr. Aisha Al-Mana. These are women's activists. And we have a celebrity in Saudi Arabia, our Princess Amira. She also came out in Riyadh and supported this project. Saudi women across the world who didn't live in Saudi Arabia sent their beads to me via DHL and got overexcited and wrote their name on everything. And because of Twitter, the young girls that were writing their names created a hashtag. And then people all over the world started putting up their names. If you see this woman is from Spanish, so my name is Elisa, and announce your name on Twitter. So if you couldn't write your name on the bead, you just put it on the internet and announce it proudly. So there's this excitement and buzz to the point that when we finished these sessions, I would tell, am I okay with time? What? Okay, 5 more minutes. So when we finished doing these sessions, I would say, okay, everybody clap, shukran, well done. I'd go home. Nobody would leave the room. They just wanted to stay. They felt this such positive energy, having so many women come into one room and just agree on, you know what? No, I want to be proud of my name. And having the whole room, I think it was sort of like a little demonstration against something that was socially unjust, and having the whole room agree with you. And you didn't have to shine out and do something so... Anyway, it was a very, very positive experience. I'll skip through all the media covered it, there was a lot of support. And then I brought the beads back to my home. I had the weavers, Bedouin weavers, who actually also wrote their names and participated in this project, put the whole project together with me in my house, and this was the final product of the artwork. So now, A State of Disappearance is showing in CAP, and I would love for you to go visit the exhibition. I have just 2 pieces there, but this is my latest project, which I produced this year, and it is also another continuation of my mother and my obsession of collecting newspapers and cutting out articles and photographs and how women are represented. So it started off by the black ghosts again, and a portrayal of women as herds that have no face, that just move, you know, زي الغنم. You move them right, you move them left. And what happened is we realized, because we were collecting for years, that our local newspaper didn't even bother taking new pictures of these ghosts. In the 4 months that I was producing this collection, one of the images that I used, which is that one, was used 6 times in 4 months. Teachers receive award. حطوا هالصورة. Women travel abroad. حطوا هالصورة. Doctors are upset. حطوا نفس الصورة. It's just they couldn't be bothered to even produce new pictures. So I started wondering about repetition and what repetition does to the mind. If you repeat a certain image over and over, what stays in your mind? Does my image as a real woman survive? And then I started looking at the same time a book by a writer. This book was written during the Abbasi era, and his name is Abu Mansur al-Tha'albi. What he did is he put together sort of a dictionary of words, Arabic words. جمعهم في ترتيب الحب وتفصيله. So these are the different levels of love. وجمع الكلمات. Half of these words we don't know. You would think that يعني أنا كان برأيي إن قالوا لنا القرآن باللغة العربية، اللغة العربية حتكون preserved لأنها it's alive and it's a miracle. But in reality, the miracle of the Quran and why the words in the Quran are preserved is because it's repeated. People read it over and over again, and that's the miracle of the لغة. مو باللغة نفسها هي اللي it's a miracle of us repeating it. So I started thinking about the words in this book, that some of them stayed, some of them disappeared. Is because of the repetition. What was repeated stayed, what was not repeated did not stay. So what are we talking about? Imagery of women. What stays? What do we want to stay? And what will disappear? And this whole act of forced disappearance, somebody is forcing these images onto us. So I decided to deconstruct it and add those words onto these pictures. But these are the levels of courage, درجات الشجاعة, مراحل الشجاعة, and هذه مراحل الحب. And then you will see more artworks within this collection on my website. I think I've run out of time. Thank you so much.